Hey there. I'm sure you have a lot of questions right now, in particular, how is somebody who does YouTube videos about anime as a hobby so devilishly handsome? And to that I have to say I drink a lot of cranberry juice. Your second biggest question is probably why am I putting lipstick on, and to answer that, because I can, and who's gonna stop me? Certainly not you. Hold on, I have one little minor detail to attend to. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, that's gonna get me demonetized. So, personally, I believe that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want and not particularly care about what people have to say. To illustrate this point, I'm going to say the N-word right here, right now.
Disclaimer: I do not support using your free will to impede on others' rights or be an offensive douche canoe. Life is about doing whatever makes you happy, but if that involves hurting yourself or hurting others, then you should not do that, man. Also, do not say the N-word if you are white. That is just a good rule of thumb.
Morality has been a very prevalent concept and theme in One Piece from the beginning. Even in Oda's original one-shot Wanted, he made a clear distinction between good and bad pirates, even going as far as giving each group a different name. Although in the current story it appears he wanted to blur the lines at least slightly to have readers interpret for themselves who is truly good and who is truly bad. Good versus bad in fiction can often be quite obvious, but given certain scenarios where characters can perform evil actions with good intention or perform good actions with malintent, the line where you can draw becomes more and more skewed. Rather than have me try and explain this, why not use a character's words that captures the theme perfectly? Doflamingo in his famous monologue at Marineford states, "Pirates are evil, the Navy is justice. Those views change as often as the tides. Kids who've never known peace have different values from those who have never known war. It is those who stand at the top that can define the definition of evil. This place is the turning point. Justice will triumph, you say? Of course it will, because the winners become justice." The speech embodies the idea that title does not necessarily dictate right and wrong. Good and bad are subjective concepts that whoever is in charge gets to decide. If you were to grow up in a world where theft and murder was not only legal, but it was encouraged, you would likely see nothing wrong with it because the people in charge determined it was just. There are constant examples throughout the story of One Piece that show people who claim to be justice doing evil and people who claim to be criminals doing good. But the evils performed by these entities claiming to be justice are often excused because they're the good guys, right? This is why, with a system like this, it is so important that we have a protagonist like Monkey D. Luffy, who, despite being a pirate and holding the title of bad guy, is caring towards animals, saves children, liberates countries, demolishes slave owners, fights against racism, and is kind to others. With all these positive actions, he must be a good guy despite his title, right? Well, not exactly. I'd like to take a look at a few examples that show the morality of Luffy and how it foreshadows the end of the series. Okay, so, in particular, I want to look at 4.5 arcs of the story. Arlong Park, Alabasta, Fishman Island, Dressrosa, and the currently running Wano Kuni. These all have a very similar premise if you take it from a certain perspective and leave out some of the details. These are all countries that are being oppressed by people in charge or attempting to take charge, in which Luffy saves the day and frees the people from the iron grip of authority. However, the most important thing to look at here is how Luffy reacts slightly differently each and every time he's faced with a similar scenario. Now, to preface this point, the most important thing to Luffy, other than his crew, is freedom. To be the Pirate King to him is to be the most free man on Earth. There is nothing better in all of reality than the power to do whatever you want and lead your life the way you desire, without regrets. In a tale of adventure with such a wide and beautiful world to explore, he is absolutely right. However, Luffy fails to recognize that not everyone has this same understanding. Whenever people aren't striving for freedom or try to ruin his own sense of freedom by giving him responsibility, he becomes very frustrated. He simply doesn't understand why people aren't willing to live their lives to the fullest. There are two types of people in the world that Luffy hates. People who treat their friends poorly, and people who take away others' freedom. This leads to why he never kills any of the antagonists he battles. Because in a way, killing someone is the ultimate removal of their freedom and ability to achieve their dreams. They'll never have the ability to live how they would like ever again. And that, to Luffy, is the worst possible scenario. One that he wouldn't wish on anyone. And he learned from Shanks in the scene where he says, now that you have drawn your pistol, put your life on the line. This essentially means that if you are willing to kill someone, then you should also be prepared to die at any moment. Luffy is not willing to kill people because he is not willing to give up his dreams for something so pointless. So ultimately, Luffy acts out of a sense of, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want and no one is going to stop me. This is not some code of honor or justice, because Luffy doesn't have time for something like that. A code of honor that you have to abide by would be restricting, which would in turn hinder the freedom he desires. He does not act out of duty, but rather desire. It just so happens that his desires tend to line up with what most people in the world would consider being morally admirable. With that out of the way, we can finally begin dissecting these arcs. First, let's take a look at Arlong Park. The island's been under the cruel reign of the Arlong pirates for years. Nami, the navigator of the ship, essentially betrays the rest of the crew by stealing their ship and treasure in order to pay Arlong the 100 million berry debt she owes him, in order to buy the village back and save everyone. Luffy eventually comes to get Nami back and try to understand why she did that. She tells him to go away many times and to leave her alone while he learns about the Arlong situation from others. Now, he sees a town full of people that are being dominated by these fishmen, and he has the power to save them, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't have a reason to. It isn't until Nami finally breaks the tough facade she carried along with the burden of responsibility that came with the lives of everyone in the village, but it isn't until she asks Luffy for his help that he decides to take action. In turn, he frees an entire village from pseudo-slavery, not because it was the right thing to do, but because his friend asked him to. The main takeaway here is that Luffy, despite being fully capable of halting this oppression, didn't do anything about it. If he was truly a morally just person, he would have kicked Arlong's ass and freed the village almost immediately upon arriving. This goes back to Luffy's sense of freedom. When people expect you to do the right thing, because you have the power to do so, that becomes restricting on the things you actually want to do. Essentially, Luffy is the antithesis to, with great power comes great responsibility, because to him, the more power you have, the more you are able to do whatever you want, because there are less people capable of putting you down. It wasn't Luffy's problem that all these people were being essentially enslaved, because if they didn't want to be, they should be doing something about it. But they weren't. Nami was the only one trying to fix the situation, which is why when she finally asked Luffy for help, he obliged. He could have gone into action much earlier, but in a way, forcing people to be free is just as utilitarian as oppressing them, which would also go against his way of thinking. Is Luffy willing to free an entire village because it's the right thing to do? No. Is Luffy willing to help his friend who needs him? Yes. But at the end of the day, he didn't care about any of the other villagers, citing only things about Nami during the fight. Don't make our navigator cry. I have to destroy this room to free her. Nami, you are my friend. It was never about the people. Only Nami. Now let's move on to the next arc, which we see a similar situation. There's a country in trouble, and a woman needs Luffy to help her. Alabasta. Now, initially, Luffy agrees to this because he just wants to test his mettle against a warlord. He doesn't know Vivi. He doesn't have any reason to care about her and her country, but during their journey to Alabasta through Drum Island and Little Garden, he comes to appreciate her as one of his own crew. This is why he's willing to go ahead with Vivi's backwards-natured plan of stopping the war rather than stopping Crocodile. She asks for his help, so he's willing to do it. However, the gears in his head start turning once he sees the city of Emerald and meets Todo and Yuba. Once he sees the damage that Crocodile has done here, he becomes very frustrated. It was different in Cocoa Village. The people knew exactly what they had to do in order to free themselves, but here, nobody had any idea what Crocodile was doing behind the scenes to this country. He was a hero, not a villain. This all culminates in the scene where Luffy and Vivi have their scuffle. Luffy exclaims that she's being too naive, thinking that she can solve the situation without dealing with Crocodile directly, and save everyone on top of it. People are going to die, and just risking your life for this country isn't going to be enough. It's here that Luffy declares that you can risk our lives along with yours and stop trying to do this alone. We're pirates, you see, and we aren't meant to stop a war that isn't our niche. Let's just go kick Crocodile's ass and leave the politics to you. It goes quite a bit deeper than that if you take it under a microscope, though. You see, Luffy's essentially declaring that he's willing to put his life on the line for this country, for Vivi. It's different than it was in Arlong Park. He shares in Vivi's desire to free her people from a cruel regime because they don't even know that it exists. But Vivi does. So for her sake, his friend's sake, he will help these people. All of this again boils over in the scene where he tells Crocodile he doesn't understand anything. To which he responds, "You're going to die fighting for someone else's goals, you see. Loyalty is only for cowards or weaklings. If you would just ditch a friend or two, you could easily avoid these inconvenient problems. That princess is a burden to you, so why not just ditch her and save yourselves?" Followed by Luffy saying, "Because none of us want Vivi to die. Helping each other is what friends do, and that's why none of us will leave her behind or quit fighting you. As long as she doesn't give up on her country, then neither will we. Even if you die? If we die, we die. So what?" This is a clear evolution of Luffy's stance on Arlong Park. He's willing to save the people of a country now, but he is still only helping people as a byproduct of helping his friend. Now moving along to Fishman Island. Luffy has a previous relationship with Jinbei, as well as developing a relationship with Shirahoshi along the way. They become the primary reason why he decides to interfere in their problems and save their country from Hody. This is where Luffy gives his famous hero speech, and we get to see him directly state, in somewhat of a roundabout way, what his morality really is to him. When asked to become the hero of Fishman Island, he says no, because a hero is for someone who, for example, at a banquet would give the meat to others, but Luffy wants to eat the meat himself. What he means by this is that he doesn't want to become someone who is obligated to help people because it's the right thing to do. If he's going to be heroic, it's going to be because he wants to, not because he has to. Again, like I said, obligations are restricting, and heroes have to abide by some sort of code of honor. Luffy does not want to be restricted by such silly things, and would rather be capable of changing his mind on a moment's notice rather than feeling internal conflict about betraying personal morals. Being a hero is a responsibility, and Luffy doesn't want that. After understanding this, then Luffy is willing to be the type of hero that he wants to be, which falls in line with the type of hero Jinbei needs him to be. Once again, Luffy saves a country of people, but this time he does it to be an inspiration, whether he understands that or not. Dressrosa is an arc that had a significant impact on Luffy's morality. You see, defeating Doflamingo was never part of the plan. It all started because Law wanted to, and somewhere along the way, Luffy decided that he wanted to as well. His desire came from multiple factors. Some could say it was because Law wanted him to, but Law never asked him for his help. I think the fact that made him decide to defeat Doflamingo was the relationship he made with Rebecca and the other Colosseum members. You see, for some people, Dressrosa was a magnificent town full of passion, love, and desire. However, for others it was slavery, oppression, and imprisonment. What many people failed to realize was that they were all under the same level of captivity. They were all equally caged by Doflamingo. In this country, you were either a prisoner or someone with a false sense of freedom. People only realized that when the birdcage went up. Only then did they realize the cage was always there. They just couldn't see it. Luffy immediately felt that the second he landed in this country, and he hated it. To him, this country was hell on earth, and he despised the demon that called it his palace. This was his driving motivation to kick Doflamingo's ass. This can be summarized in his speech before delivering the final blow, when he exclaims to him, "You always try to strangle everything in your hands and manipulate people. It makes me feel like I'm suffocating." Doflamingo is the purest form of evil to Luffy because he actively enjoys taking freedom away from people, which is why he was willing to save them without being asked to. At this point, he has evolved into someone who will help those who don't have the power to help themselves. Not because it's his responsibility to, but because he wants to. Now finally in Wano, Luffy comes with the full intention to defeat Kaido, but suddenly gains a new objective. When he meets Tama, he immediately has a connection with her through Ace. Through her lack of health, he is able to see the damage that Kaido has done to this place. Luffy begins to understand that there is more in the line to defeating Kaido than just as a milestone on becoming the Pirate King. He needs to provide people like Tama with a safe place to live. It isn't her fault that she can't live the life she wants, and all she's ever known is polluted poverty. She has never even known what freedom feels like, so how could she desire it? One who knows nothing can understand nothing. Furthermore, once Luffy is defeated by Kaido and imprisoned, it is one of the only times we see Luffy in a situation in which his freedom is taken away from him. He is imprisoned and is constantly looking for the way out, constantly striving to find his freedom again. And when he's able to achieve it, all the other prisoners do as well, however they don't want it. They have grown comfortable in their captured lives. It is far easier to give up than to resist. This infuriates Luffy, who has only been imprisoned for less than 2 weeks as opposed to the decades that these men have had their freedom stripped away from them. How dare they choose enslavement over freedom? It is a thought process that simply does not compute in his mind. This causes him to say, "What do you mean, normal life? Obeying every order they give you, living off dumplings, is that normal? Open your eyes, you're nothing but slaves." He then continues to rally and inspire them to achieve the freedom they have been missing. This is a serious evolution from the Luffy we saw in Arlong Park. He is outraged by authority and understands that some people don't crave the freedom they deserve. Whether he likes it or not, he becomes a hero to all the people he meets and spreads his message of freedom across the Grand Line. Luffy is no longer a person who believes everyone is responsible for becoming free on their own, but understands that not everyone knows how liberating it feels. So what does this all mean going forward? What does the evolution of Luffy's morality and his concept of freedom mean for the end of the story? Well, there's one governing body that oppresses the majority of the world under its rule: the world government. Some way, somehow, they're going to have to come to an end, but why would Luffy care? The only bodies of the government he has particularly clashed with are the Marines in CP9. This has only been when they have put the freedom of himself or his Nakama in danger as well. If the main organization is to come to an end, then Luffy needs to have a reason to do it. Well, the Rio Poneglyph exists on Raftel. Robin has full intention to find it, and Robin and Luffy have always had a relationship where she dumbs down important information to him in a way he can properly interpret. If you've noticed throughout the series, whenever someone other than Robin tries to explain something to him, it either goes over his head or he just shrugs it off, saying, "It's a mystery." However, I believe that Luffy will see how important this information is to Robin and ask her what it means. Following learning what happened in the Void Century, Luffy will come to understand that the world government is the ultimate form of oppression, one whose entire existence has been to snuff out the power, liberties, and freedom of all individuals. Understanding this, Luffy will take everything he has learned in his journey as a culmination of his experiences. There are people who want freedom but lack the power to do so. There are people who aren't aware of the true enemy and have lost sight of the path. There are people who need a hero. There are people who don't know they are slaves, and there are people who are too broken to fight back. Luffy will not simply ignore this truth of the world. He will most certainly act, not out of an obligation to do the right thing, but as a desire to give everyone a chance to live with the same degree of freedom as he has lived his own life. Thus beginning the final arc of the show with the final villains, oppression itself. Defeating the world government is the only way anyone can truly be free, and is the only way to create one peace over the world. To give everyone the opportunity to live their lives the way they desire, that is what it means to be king of the pirates.